Karen Reed was a college professor dating a Boston police officer named John O'Keefe. Outside of her friends, family, and students, no one really knew much about her. But that anonymity changed one snowy night in Canton, Massachusetts. After she and John went bar hopping downtown, Karen drove them to the home of another Boston police officer. He had invited a bunch of folks over to his house for a little after-hours party before the blizzard was supposed to roll in through town. John O'Keefe died that night, and everyone agrees it was a homicide. But the question is, who is responsible? And the answer depends upon who you ask. The prosecutor says John never made it inside the home because Karen purposely backed over him with her SUV and left him lying in the cold on the front yard to die. Karen says John did go inside to that party, and she went back to John's house. She also believes it was someone inside the house who killed John and then put him on the front yard to frame her. After more than 9 weeks, more than 70 witnesses, the question is, what will this jury say? Tonight, we have the latest from the courthouse as we continue our investigation into the tragic death of Officer John O'Keefe.
I'm Vinnie Politan. Thank you for joining us tonight here on Closing Arguments. Wow, here we are on Friday. A lot of expectations going into the day, and a lot happened today, but we're still not there. This, I think we can all agree, is an unusual case. Very unusual case for many reasons. Part of it begins with everything that has happened outside of the courtroom. Extremely unusual for a case of, it's a murder involving two people who knew each other, two people who were a couple. Those are the allegations. And in cases like that, you generally don't get public reaction to this extent, especially public reaction supporting the accused killer. And from the beginning, I knew this is what set this case apart from the rest. And as a result of this public reaction outside the courthouse and in the community and all over social media, you've created a very intense situation at the courthouse. Extremely intense. Much more intense than you would expect for a case of this nature. But that's where we are. That's where we are in the Karen Reed murder trial. The death of John O'Keefe, a Boston police officer. So I also think that we can agree this is a tough case. And I say that for a couple of reasons. One, two completely different versions. You've got Karen Reed accused of admitting to this, and then you've got a lead investigator who had to admit to a lot of problems with some of the things he was saying and some of the things he was allegedly doing in this case. So the key to the defense, the defendant, the key to the prosecution, the lead investigator, and both have issues depending upon what you believe and who you believe and how they testified in this case. So here we are, and here's the jury, apparently deadlocked at this moment. Unable, after Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, to reach a verdict, and they actually spoke to the jury through their note today. It was a big moment. I don't know if we expected it or didn't expect it. I don't know. I never know what 12 strangers that I never met are going to do when they get inside a room and try to figure out a 9-week trial. But here's what happened when they sent the note out to the judge.
We're back on the record on 22-117, the Commonwealth versus Karen Reed.
Okay. All right, so counsel, you're aware of our note from the jury. Dear Judge Cannoni, I am writing to inform you on behalf of the jury that despite our exhaustive review of the evidence and our diligent consideration of all disputed evidence, we have been unable to reach a unanimous verdict, signed by the foreperson. So I want to hear from counsel your view on whether there has been due and thorough deliberation. So let's start with the Commonwealth.
My answer would be no, Your Honor. This simply hasn't been sufficient time yet.
And what does the defense say?
We believe that there has been sufficient.
All right, so I'll hear from both of you in more detail. Mr. Lally, I will hear you.
Your Honor, the jury received this case just earlier this week. They've had slightly shortened days, and I'm not in any way, shape, or form suggesting that they haven't conducted their due diligence in regard to their deliberative process, but I would submit that it is far, far, far too early in their deliberative process to even consider giving them any kind of Tui Rodriguez instruction or anything close to that. Furthermore, what the note doesn't really indicate affirmatively that they can't come to a conclusion. It just says that they haven't come to a conclusion through their deliberative process at this time. They're not even asking for one, is what I would say.
All right, thank you. Ms. Giannetti, I'll hear you.
Your Honor, I would disagree with Mr. Lally's characterization of the note. The word exhaustive is the word I think that's operative here. They're communicating to the court that they've exhausted all manner of compromise, all manner of persuasion, and they're at an impasse. This is a case where the jury has the legal instructions. They've only really asked one question, which was to try to get a report that they were not allowed to get. And I think the message has been received that the evidence is closed. They won't get anything more. They've been working essentially nonstop over the last 3-4 days. We're approaching a weekend. They didn't come back with this at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock. They're at 12 o'clock, and they have nowhere to turn. So our position is the jury should be read the Tui Rodriguez model instruction and go from there.
Okay. All right, so you all know that it is within my discretion, I decide. So a case that has been, it's a long case. This is our 4th day of deliberations, but Tuesday was a short afternoon, maybe 2.5 hours. Wednesday, they left early because of an appointment. Yesterday was also shortened a little bit, and this note arrived with less than 3 hours of deliberations today. So the length of the trial, the length of the deliberations, I know the case we heard from 74 witnesses. There are 657 exhibits, very complex issues in this case. I'm not prepared to find that there have been due and thorough deliberations at this point. So I am going to send them back out. We'll bring them in, and we'll do that now.
All right, to the court, please. Jurors entering.
Right, so jurors, I'm in receipt of your note. I am writing to inform you on behalf of the jury that despite our exhaustive review of the evidence and our diligent consideration of all disputed evidence, we have been unable to reach a unanimous verdict signed by your foreperson. We all know how hard you've been working. Lunch will be arriving shortly. When it comes, I'd ask you to clear your heads, have lunch, and begin your deliberations again. Or continue your deliberations. All right? So I'm sending you back out.
Wow. All right, let's bring in Court TV crime and justice correspondent Matt Johnson, joining us live from outside the courthouse in Dedham, Massachusetts. Matt, wow, what a big moment there. The jury's working hard, obviously didn't come to agreement. They're trying to. They felt that they couldn't, but they went back to work. Tell us about deliberations today.
Hey, Vinny, that was a big moment here in Dedham. I mean, everyone's on pins and needles at the courthouse here after these 9 weeks. And you heard Judge Cannoni right there just how intense this case has been and how much evidence they have to go through. So the 6 men, 6 women on the jury after 4 days of deliberation, still no verdict, and they're being required to come back next week. Well, the day started out with what appeared to be confidence on both sides. You had Karen Reed arriving with her entourage today. Now she has security detail that are volunteers along with her family and those state police officers that lead her to the entrance of the courthouse. They looked very confident today after telling our crew yesterday that they felt good after a third day of deliberations with no verdict. We also saw the O'Keefe family present today, and we saw them in full force, including John O'Keefe Sr. and Peggy O'Keefe. They all didn't attend every single day of testimony, so it was big to see everybody from the family in attendance today for part of the day. But at the end of the day, as you know, the jury was sent home. They were unable to reach a verdict, and here's that moment.
So, jurors, we all know how hard you've been working. It's been a long day. We're going to let you go home. We'll see you Monday morning at 9 o'clock. To the extent that you can, please just not think about this case this weekend. Clear your heads. We'll start fresh another Monday.
And Karen Reed and her attorneys no longer answering questions of the press as they leave the courthouse. They haven't answered anyone's questions, really, since the start of deliberations. So that's a big change as well with what we're seeing with this defendant and this defense team.
All right, let's talk about another part of this case, another part of this trial, another part of this story, and that is the scene outside the courthouse. What was that like today?
Yeah, it's been fluctuating, Vinny, because on the day of closing arguments on Tuesday and those first couple hours of deliberations, we were seeing upwards of 400 supporters across the street in that buffer zone where they have to maintain and be away from the courthouse entrance. Well, it's been fluctuating over the past couple days. Again, today is day 4 of deliberations. Today, they were still strong and out in force, and they were also rallying each other. Take a listen.
Scientific evidence, by the way, that came from people that are hired by the Department of Justice and the FBI, and guess what? The United States military. If there is someone on that jury that denies that irrefutable evidence, we got a problem. And we will address that. Let them go.
And that pretty much happens all day. This crowd gets fired up, and they also cheer every time Karen Reed walks by. But there was a big moment today for this, for these supporters, because they were met by anti-Karen Reed protesters. The very first time that our cameras have caught anti-Karen Reed protesters. They were holding signs of their own. They were also very vocal. Take a listen.
Karen Reed is guilty, and there needs to be justice for her. This is wrong on so many levels. Her family has been harassed relentlessly, including yesterday, even when these circus animals went down there to harass the O'Keefe family. Have some respect. A man has died. He has lost his life, and those children lost 3 adults that took care of them.
Now, Vinny, there's a lot of things that we read online, and I want to dispel a lot of myths just in case there's anything written about the interaction here. Yeah, they were shouting with each other across the street and in person, but no one was violent during these interactions that I witnessed. And also, these Karen Reed protesters, they were saying that there's actually a lot more of them. But there was only about 5 or 6 that showed up at the courthouse here today because they say a lot of people are concerned or worried to view that opinion. It really shows that this community is divided.
Yeah, interesting to see for the first time during this entire case, like from pre-trial to trial to now, that we're seeing folks from the other side, anti-Karen Reed, believes she should be convicted, believes that she should go to prison. Okay, let's talk about Karen Reed a little bit. You know, this is a big development in the case when a jury comes back and says, you know, we're deadlocked, we're at an impasse. What was her demeanor like today?
Her demeanor started off very confident when she was walking in on the courthouse steps with her attorneys by her side. She was in court. I was looking at her. She was, you know, smiling with her family members in court. You can see, you know, She's very confident right there, by all accounts. And she has been throughout this whole trial, but she's also been very hands-on with her defense team. When I've been in court during the testimony, during the 9 weeks, she's writing Post-it notes, she's going through those evidence books, she's also passing notes and talking to her attorneys. She was very active. But now that all the evidence is in, and her fate is within these 12 people that are going to decide whether or not she's behind bars and convicted or she goes free, she's a lot more serious. And inside the courthouse here behind me, I see her huddled with her attorneys. And then I also see her behind in other rooms where she's praying with her family. So it's all become very real for Karen Read.
All right, Matt Johnson working hard again all day today, all week, 9 weeks. I guess now it's really 10 weeks, right? So, Matt, enjoy the weekend, but we'll see you again on Monday. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Now I want to bring in a special guest, one of the lawyers who represented Johnny Depp in his defamation case and a partner of Brown Rudnick, LLP. Wayne Dennison is back with us. Wayne, great to see you. I wanted to get your take on what's happening here, because you were at another court TV trial that we covered, again, with our cameras, but it was a big scene in that case outside of the courthouse. So I want to take a look at both scenes kind of next to one another and then get your take on all of it. So let's put that up on the screen if we can. So you can see the different scenes on the left and on the right. Obviously the scene at Johnny Depp, a little different. Obviously people there on the one hand to support someone who's a public celebrity. Here, on the other hand, people supporting someone who was never a celebrity, who they didn't know before all of this. How would you characterize the similarities and the differences between what happened in Virginia and what's happening up in Massachusetts in terms of the public reaction and the public scene outside of the courthouses?
Well, I think the public scene outside the courthouses are similar in some ways, although, quite frankly, Amber Heard had a few people who were in favor of her position in the Depp trial. And today was the first time that we saw any anti-Karen Read folk. The principal difference here is the trial that I was involved in and the trial that you were at, Vinnie, was a trial between two people who were major celebrities, including one of them who's probably the best actor of his generation. This has grown organically through social media, I guess, but the organic growth of the number of people who care about this trial, who actually are in attendance to this trial, I think is incredible.
Now, there's something else that happened today. We saw folks from the other side, people not supporting Karen Read, believed that she should go, and there was actually a moment of confrontation. Let's take a look.
You look insane. You literally look insane. I don't need to walk away, crazy person. Well, you think she's a terrible person because she supports Julia or Justin. We haven't had a verdict yet. So? I know. Why don't we have like an actual pleasant conversation? Like, what is your thoughts? Tell me what your thoughts are. I would love to know because I want to see what you're thinking.
Turtle Boy.
What does he have anything to do with anything? Turtle Boy.
Hey, it's the Turtle Boy.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Of course. Yeah.
You guys told you what to do. He just wrote on his game. He didn't even know this was for sale. His family did nothing. His family did nothing.
So, Wayne, what are your thoughts here? And it's different, right? Because at Johnny Depp, Amber Heard, there was no one there for Amber Heard, by the way. There were, I think, 2 people, maybe 3 in the whole crowd.
Yeah, there weren't very many, and quite frankly, everybody was extremely well behaved. I know that Amber has taken a position that people said horrible things to her. Quite frankly, I never heard that. You know, my sense of it was that there wasn't any confrontation at the Depp trial. There were very few people who were supporting Amber Heard. Quite frankly, we're the last day of deliberations, or maybe we'll get another day of deliberations before the judge decides whether this is a hung jury. And this is the first day that you've seen anti-Karen Read protesters. One would have, I would have assumed you would have seen them before this.
Yeah, exactly. Especially if they believe that she took the life of a police officer. You would also expect perhaps to see some police officers there as well, but we haven't necessarily seen that in this case. Bottom line, Wayne, what do you think the impact is, if anything, on jurors knowing knowing or not knowing necessarily what's going on outside?
Well, irrespective of the fact that there are these zones that we have to keep people into, jurors know what's happening outside the courthouse. They have to park their cars. Quite frankly, I practice in that courthouse quite a lot. The parking lot's across the street. You largely have to go past these protesters, even if you're a juror. So irrespective of whether these people are away from the courthouse, the jurors are aware of them. I'm quite confident that the jurors take their oaths seriously, and they put that out of their deliberations and out of their mind. But it's not a situation where they'd be unaware of what's happening out front.
Wayne Dennison, great to see you on this Friday night. Enjoy the weekend, and perhaps we'll be speaking again next week about, I don't know, maybe a verdict. Thanks so much. All right, folks, when we come back, we've got more to get to in this case. What exactly happens now? The jury has sent out a note. What's going to happen on Monday? We'll bring in our local attorneys to break it down.
They probably want to methodically follow protocol and go through the notes. Do the things that the Canton police should have done up front and the state police should have done up front and follow the protocol.
On the next episode of Accomplice to Murder.
It looked like Virginia and Norman really had a wonderful relationship.
But then greed planted the seeds of a brutal murder.
$1.1 million in benefits to Virginia.
And when she couldn't find a hitman, she decided to use her son, Jason.
She said, no one is going to be getting in the way of me collecting that insurance money, or they'll wind up just like Norm.
Accomplice to Murder with Vinnie Politan. All new episode, Sunday night, 8, 7 Central.
Only on Court TV.
Dear Judge Cannoni, I am writing to inform you on behalf of the jury that despite our exhaustive review of the evidence and our diligent consideration of all disputed evidence, we have been unable to reach a unanimous verdict. Signed by the foreperson. We all know how hard you've been working. Lunch will be arriving shortly. When it comes, I'd ask you to clear your heads, have lunch, and begin your deliberations again. So, or continue your deliberations, all right? So I'm sending you back out.
It's really fascinating the way our system of justice works, right? So we bring in 12 strangers who don't know each other anything. Many of them probably have never even seen a trial before. Then, we have them there for 9 weeks. It's a complicated case. It's emotional. It's gut-wrenching. And then we instruct them on the law, and then they try to figure it out. And then after, on the 4th day, they're like, we can't agree. We send a note out, and then the reaction is, go back in there, have some lunch and go back in there. And then we don't tell them what to do. We don't instruct them how to deliberate necessarily. We just tell them, you go in there and deliberate, figure it out, right? And then, but they send the note saying, we can't figure it out, but go figure it out. So do they know that they need to send out another note saying they can't figure it out? We don't tell them that. But if they send out another note, what's the judge going to do? Send them back in again? And then another note? When does this end for them? How does it end? When does it deadlock? I need answers. Let's bring in our guests. Former head of the homicide unit in the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office, Attorney Rick Grundy is with us, and criminal defense attorney, college instructor, and author Peter Alec. All right, so today we hear them throwing out the old we got to give them the Tui Rodriguez instruction there. All right, so everyone at home is wondering, what's the Tui Rodriguez? So, Rick, do you want to go? So what happens if this jury is working again on Monday, and they're like, wait, can we send, and they send another note out to the judge. What are they going to do? They're going to give them the old Tui Rodriguez? And if so, what is it?
So I believe that at that point in time, she's going to be, based on a law, and I'll defer to Peter on this, but based on a law that they have done put in the time, done a good hard shot at it, and she'll instruct them Tui Rodriguez. Tui Rodriguez says that there is no other jury that is going to have a better option than you to decide this case. You are the people. You can do it. I'm going to send you back out to get together and reach that verdict.
So it's like a pep talk.
The big thing about Tui Rodriguez. Exactly. Well, and I think it's to dispel any concerns they have, like they're in over their head. We just weren't up to this. Somebody will do a better job. It's to tell them, no, you are the people. You're the team. Let's go. The big thing about Tui Rodriguez, though, is if they come back after Tui Rodriguez and say we're still deadlocked, it's out of the judge's hand and it's a mistrial.
So it's like the old ball game, right, Peter? It's like the old ball game. 1, 2, 3 notes, you're out, right? That's what it's going to take here. Like, we have 12 strangers, and they've got to tell the judge 3 different times that they're deadlocked before we accept them saying that they're deadlocked.
Yeah, the judge wants to make sure they leave no stone unturned. Could you imagine if we had to retry this case again, go back to square one, start all over? So they just want to, they kind of push and prod the jury. And we've seen judges send people back 2 or 3 or 4 times. And
4 times?
It does get ridiculous, and at some point you have to throw in the towel and say they're not going to make a decision. But there is actual case law in Massachusetts that a judge should not be giving that Tui Rodriguez instruction too premature. You should wait a little while. This case, relatively speaking, is really rather early for a deadlocked jury. I mean, it was a total of like 18 hours, and they came back and said we're deadlocked. Normally it's a week or 2 weeks, and then at that point they say we can't go any further. So the judge is kind of obligated to push them at least one more time, perhaps 2 times. And then at that point, and particularly when the jury will say things like, not only can't we come to a conclusion, but we don't think we're going to be able to come. It's like we are at such, loggerheads that it ain't going to happen.
Well, it's interesting because, Court TV, we cover trials all over the country and in a lot of states. One note does it in some states, and I've seen judges do that. And other ones, if there's a second note, they're never going past the second note. Here, it looks like it's going to take 3 notes from this jury. And it's interesting. We don't tell them that. Like, they don't know. So, like, they're sort of working in the dark to a certain extent. I don't know how fair that is to the jury that we don't tell them this. But I think we don't tell them on purpose because we want them to come to a verdict. So let's think about this now. In this case, with this set of facts, right? Like, I think there's only 2 places you can be. Either you believe she struck him with the car, or you don't believe she struck him with the car, right? I mean, and that's like a fact. Like, if you believe one side of the fact, then you are in on guilt. If you believe the other side, you're in on not guilty. So how does someone even compromise? How could a juror, if it's 2, if it's 3, if it's 1, if it's 4, how on earth could they make their way over to the other side, or where could a compromise be in a case like this? And I'll start with Peter on this one.
Actually, this is Judge Cannone. A year ago, we had a very well-known case, and that happened. They had a deadlocked jury, and so the mistrial was declared. Then they had a second trial. They retried the case. The jury said they were deadlocked. Judge Cannone sent them back, and they actually came back and convicted them. So it works some of the time. To me, just the fact that I'm being pushed and prodded and pressured might not do the trick. But what I'm really curious about in this, right at this moment, which is the bottom line for me, is we don't know what's going on inside that jury deliberation room. It could be one of 2 things. It could be are 11 people on one side, and there's one person who's unreasonable and just not giving in, and you got to be unanimous, and that's why they're blocked. Or is it, you have 2 reasonable sides, and people are equally divided on each end? So I'm really curious. Is it just, is the jury almost unanimous, or is it really divided? And we will never find that out. And I mean, obviously.
Well, let me tell you something. And Rick, you tell me what the law is and the practice in Massachusetts. But I've been in states where the judge inquires on what the split is. They don't do that in Massachusetts?
That's not going to happen in Massachusetts. No, but, I think we will find out at some point in time. A juror will juror's free to speak to the press and let that out. So we'll probably get an idea. But I think it's a very important point.
What if they put it in the note? What if they put it in the note? Will the judge read it out loud if it's put in the note? Will the lawyers find out?
In all likelihood, I would say, knowing that it's being broadcast, you would not read that. Obviously, it would be shared with the attorneys, and they would know that. She may read it, but I was actually a little surprised at the attorney's reaction, because I would have flipped it if I were to guess. The Commonwealth was like, send them back, let them deliberate some more, and the defense was like, nope, end it, drop the curtain, let's go. As I said, I would have guessed it would have been the other way around. The prosecutor, the defense was so cocky in their case and seemed so self-assured of themselves. Maybe they just got knocked off and were like, wow, this is not going the way we want to. Let's see if we can get a redo.
What would a retrial look like in this one? Would there be, I mean, generally speaking, we say the retrial, favors the prosecution. Do you think in this case, the retrial will also favor the prosecution, as most cases historically on court TV and I think around the country go when it comes to retrials? Peter?
As I was just bringing up earlier, a lot of it depends, and my mindset will be changed, finding out, is it 11-1 and 11 wanted to quit and 1 didn't? And then I'd say that perhaps it would not be that easy a retrial, or maybe they would bring an entirely new strategy. And certainly, I have a feeling they really need to get rid of that murder charge, because there wasn't even any evidence presented showing that she intentionally, even if you believe the car hit him, nobody knows whether it was intentional or an accident under the worst case scenario there. So I think they might refashion the charges, and they might put together an entirely new and different strategy if they, in fact, do decide to retry the case if it winds up being a mistrial.
How about a deal, Rick? Do you think there would be talks if this was deadlocked? And is there any scenario that the prosecution could offer something where she would not be put into prison, like a home confinement or something?
So the answer to your question is yes, they certainly could. It would defy the facts that they've presented, but it wouldn't be the first time that something along that nature has happened. I think, in my opinion, the prosecution is in a stronger position, agreeing that the prosecution is normally in the better position of the parties in a retrial. I think they're even in a stronger position here because they don't think that they put their best foot forward. I think they likely learned a lot in actually trying this case. And I think the defense is always, particularly in this case where they had so much pretrial publicity, their defense was nothing as it was tried in the papers prior. And I was also shocked to see that this whole dog bite thing that was so important to them, one of their witnesses was just walked in off the street. I don't think she was a very good witness. And the other two were fed to them by the federal grand jury probe. So what were they doing for 2 years with respect to their own experts? So I think the prosecution would be in a much stronger point at that point. But I think this DA's office has sent all the signals that we would love this thing to be over. So I think your idea of a potential plea would, and an attractive one, would be placed before Ms. Reed at that point.
All right, our experts are staying with us. When we come back, we're going to take you inside that jury room, inside the minds and the dynamics of the jury. Obviously, our cameras don't go in there, but what's that dynamic like? We'll bring in Susan Constantine, jury consultant.
deliberating on evidence, I would assume that the hang-up is intent, because I don't know that I'm even sold that she meant to do this, but she certainly did this.
As one of the anti-Karen Reed protesters at the courthouse today, seemingly settling there on the manslaughter charge rather than the murder charge at the top of the account. But the jury has not agreed. Like, the 12 folks there have not agreed. They sent the note just before lunch today. Then the judge sent them back to deliberate. They told the judge they would work until 4:15. 4:15 came, no verdict. They're coming back Monday. So they're deadlocked. They're deadlocked. They said they were thoroughly gone through everything. They exhausted everything. So what's the dynamic? What's happening inside that jury room? Still with me, Rick Grundy, Peter Alec, and joining us now, jury consultant and human behavior expert, Susan Constantine. Susan, thank you for joining us tonight. What are your thoughts about the dynamic? We don't know much about this jury. We know 6 men, 6 women. I don't know if that has anything to do with how this is breaking down in this case. Obviously, we don't know what the split is with the numbers, etc. But how about the human dynamic to compromise, to go from one side to the other side? What does it take? How does that happen inside of a jury room?
Well, it generally starts out with a majority. So that first ballot vote, how many of them find her guilty, and then how many are finding her not guilty? That first ballot vote, if they took one. Then we have all of the different personalities, right? And sometimes that can get a little sketchy. If you've ever watched inside a mock jury case and just watched the dynamics, it can get quite heated in there. You've got analyzers, you've got strong feelers, you have other people that are like silent jurors that really harbor a lot of internal thoughts, but they don't really express. So when you look at the entire dynamic, how do you bring them closer? Is really with a strong leader in the room to help them go through each piece of that evidence and look at it and then come up with a conclusion they think that is reasonable. So it's not about necessarily what's right or wrong. What can you live with? And see, that's what I think where they're getting tripped up on. The other thing is, I think is what's happening, we have analysis by paralysis. They're overthinking. I think that this weekend will be good for them. Get out of that courtroom. It's a weekend. They're flooded. Refresh, refocus, clear their heads, reset. They'll have much more clarity. Let's see what's going to happen on Monday.
Is it easier for someone sitting there to go from not guilty to guilty, or from guilty to not guilty?
Here's what I find is that they have to live with it. So what happens with jurors is they're thinking about how they perceive the information, they're relaying it to themselves. Can they actually live with that decision? And it's really more about them than it is even about the defendant. Can they live with that verdict?
Rick Grundy, something else that I've seen through the years of court TV, sometimes we have partial verdicts. They reach a verdict on one count, but maybe get caught up on another count. And we don't necessarily tell a jury that it's okay if they do that. They should let us know. We send them in there so blindly. What are your thoughts about this case and the potential for a partial verdict, Rick?
Well, if we really want to get into the dangerous area of reading the tea leaves, I've thought about that with respect to this case, where you have so many options laid before you. If we want to think along the lines of there's a majority here, and what is the majority trying to get the minority to buy into? They have all these proposals. They could try and sell them on a manslaughter. They could try and sell them on the leaving the scene. They can go down this scale to try and get those that are not with them on that side. So they have a lot of options. Whereas if we look at it from the other side, if the majority, again, we don't know that, they're not evenly split, but if there is a majority trying to get a minority to go with them, and that majority is not guilty, the bargaining position has shrunk to virtually nothing, right?
Yeah,
so now it's like,
all or nothing.
No, she is not guilty, right? She's not guilty, get on board with us. And I agree with the expert, always do, but the idea, to me as a prosecutor, the fear of hung juries always struck immediately that it's easier to go from from guilty to not guilty, just because you live with the idea that if there is any doubt, it's better that this person not go to jail. That's our system is based on. That's one of the premises. It's better to let a guilty person go free than an innocent person go to jail.
And Susan, do you think in the thought process at all, they're in that room with the defendant for 9 weeks, but they're also looking directly at the victim's family for 9 weeks, like day in and day out. And this was a tiny, tiny courtroom.
Yeah, there's a lot of emotions that go on there, and there's that familiarity when they look at Karen Reed. They create this bond with her. They've gotten to know her almost as if they've known her for a long time, but yet now on the other side of it, they have the guilt, like I hate to have the defendant walk over this dead body and get off. So there's a lot of weight on their shoulders. And that's why when it really comes down to it, when you look at jury research, the research has found is that can they actually live with that verdict? It's a really interesting dynamic. Some can. They can clearly go, yep, she's guilty, not guilty. Some not so much. And I think that's where we're having the issue on those. It's the personalities that are happening and strong belief systems, maybe some guilt, fear. There's a lot of dynamics there, but I hope that there's someone this weekend will help them to kind of clear their head. I do have confidence that this jury can come back and decide on a verdict, but I think it's going to take some time just to clear their head, get deflooded. Right now, they're over-flooded. They got so much in here, they got to get rid of it.
Maybe they watch the Sox this weekend. We're out of time for tonight. We're out of time for this week with you all, but thank you so much. Rick Grundy, Peter Alec, and Susan Constantine, thank you. When we come back, I will reveal something else you need to know tonight, and it's about this weekend. You don't want to miss that. Plus, we've got a lot more coming up next hour.
The action was just to pull out the revolver, and it went off.
2 people accidentally shot.
Alec Baldwin was the actor on set. Alec Baldwin? Yes, sir.
Hurry, hurry, hurry was the motto on the set.
Right away, let's reload.
Alec Baldwin claims he didn't pull the trigger. Well, the FBI disagrees.
It's not going to fire until you pull the trigger.
They really do have to show that he couldn't care less.
The Case Against Alec Baldwin premieres Sunday, 9/8 Central on Court TV.
Welcome back. Time to reveal something else you need to know tonight. Take a look at the screen. Oh, Alec Baldwin, do you know the way to Santa Fe? Alec Baldwin's motion to dismiss the charges against him was denied again. The trial will go forward July 9th, right here on your front row seat to justice. So once we close out the Karen Reed case, get ready for Alec Baldwin. But even bigger news this weekend. This weekend, you can watch the case against Alec Baldwin. Here's a preview.
Santa Fe 911, what's the location of your emergency? We need an ambulance out at Bonanza Creek Ranch right now. We've got 2 people shot. One of them was shot accidentally. In wasn't actually with them, but they sounded like they had a medic on scene and were trying to deal with that portion of it.
I think the first person I made eye contact with was Helena, who was clearly injured. She was starting to go flush, and I think holding her right side. She said, "I can't feel my legs."
We need a seal. You have a seal?
A seal?
Seal.
Yeah, keep the answer down. I got a sterile glove and a backing gloves.
Okay. Yeah.
Right here.
Are you over there? Over there? Yep. Yeah. My hand is on it. Talking. Where's that? Right shoulder. Stop. Oh, we're gonna get you up.
First she shot her?
Right side. She came in here and went across her chest. And it came.
Okay.
And it went into the.
You want air flight?
Yeah, we got one in route.
Okay.
The case against Alec Baldwin premieres Sunday night, 9 p.m. right here on your front row seat to justice, right after Accomplice to Murder. We'll see you Sunday night.
When a police officer is murdered, it makes news. When his girlfriend is charged with the murder, it makes big news. But when his girlfriend says she was framed by police who are the real killers, it makes huge news. And that is the story of Boston police officer John O'Keefe and Karen Reed. He was killed and left to die in the cold on the front yard of a fellow Boston police officer. She's on trial accused of purposely backing her SUV over him. And in this case, the lead investigator was attacked by the defense as a biased trooper who was out to get Karen and to protect his brothers in blue. The 70-plus witnesses have testified. The attorneys have made all their arguments. And now the question is, what will this jury say? We'll break down all the latest as we continue our investigation into the tragic death of Boston police officer John O'Keefe.
I'm Vinnie Politan. Thank you for joining us here in Closing Arguments. The search for the truth in this case has been difficult, extremely difficult for this jury. They've been at it Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and again today. Working hard, locked in that room, 12 of them together, trying to agree as to what happened to John O'Keefe. And then what does it mean when you figure that out and take into consideration the instructions of the judge, the law in the case? We haven't gotten a verdict yet. Take a listen to Judge Beverly Cannoni once again speaking to the jury after they had sent her a note saying, "We are deadlocked."
Dear Judge Cannoni, I am writing to inform you on behalf of the jury that despite our exhaustive review of the evidence and our diligent consideration of all disputed evidence, we have been unable to reach a unanimous verdict, signed by the foreperson. We all know how hard you've been working. Lunch will be arriving shortly. When it comes, I'd ask you to clear your heads, have lunch, and begin your deliberations again. Or continue your deliberations, all right? So I'm sending you back out.
So after that, the jury went back in another 3.5 hours of deliberations and not reaching a verdict on this Friday. They had reached a conclusion initially amongst themselves. They're like, we're going to agree to disagree here. But the way it works in a trial, as we've seen time and time again, is that it's going to take a couple more notes before this judge declares a mistrial and says this is a hung jury. So they're back at it. They'll be back on Monday. So what I wanted to spend some time doing tonight, right now, is to try to get into the minds of all the people and players involved in all of this. This is a very stressful situation, to say the least, for everyone involved, whether it's the family of John O'Keefe, whether it is Karen Reed herself, the attorneys, the judge, the supporters from both sides of this case, and ultimately the jury who must make this decision. So let me bring in my expert. I want to bring her in right away. Forensic psychiatrist, trial expert, witness, columnist, Dr. Carol Lieberman is with us on this Friday night. Dr. Lieberman, thank you so much for joining us. Let's start with getting inside these jurors' minds and what they're dealing with. This is a high-profile case around the country now, but where they're from, Norfolk County, this is like everyone is talking about it. Like it's getting so bad. Matt Johnson was reporting that there are places of business downtown that won't allow employees to talk about it at work because it's so divisive. And you're talking about an officer who's been killed. You're talking about a woman charged with the murder. You've got allegations of police misconduct, of her being framed, of dirty cops, all of it. Do they feel the pressure and the bigness and the importance of this moment that they're involved in?
Yes, I think that they do. You know, before any trial, the attorneys do what's called voir dire, asking prospective jurors different questions about their life and so on, and about how they feel about certain things. Like in this case, they probably asked whether they had any run-ins with police or what do they think about police, things like that. But you can't control for what's called unconscious bias. And even though these prospective jurors may say, oh, yes, I would be able to just look at the evidence and, you know, objectively tell you what I think and come to a verdict and so on, they may think that and want that, but that may not be true. Now, what's interesting, particularly today, I think one of the reasons why they unconsciously aren't coming to a verdict, I mean, I think it was way too soon for them to ask, you know, to say we can't come to a verdict, because there were 657 exhibits, 74 witnesses, 10 weeks of trial. I mean, it's not really asking too much to have them deliberate a little longer. But I think today might hold the key, because as you were saying, what happened today is that, you know, there have been pretty much every day supporters for Karen Read. And that is intimidating to jurors. I think the jurors should absolutely have been sequestered. I think if they had been sequestered, this whole, you know, they would have come to us a verdict already, perhaps. But in any case, today, now that there were people who came out, you know, besides the intimidating for Karen Read, free Karen Read, all of that, now there are people for John O'Keefe. And I think that jurors who, of course, pass by this each time they come into the courthouse, I think that that will give, you know, if there are people holding out because they don't want to find her guilty because of the repercussions that might happen to them in town, people being angry at them for finding her guilty. I think perhaps now that they see that there are these other protesters and, you know, that there's a little more leeway, this might allow them to feel more comfortable in actually finding her guilty. Of something, of one of the things.
Right,
you
and
know, maybe
there
not
are
murder.
options here. So if the majority is in the guilty of something camp, there's places for them to go. But if the majority is not guilty, there, as Rick Grundy pointed out to us last hour, there's no room to really negotiate. It's either, if it's not guilty, it's like just not guilty. There's no lesser not guilty. There's not like, oh, not really guilty. There's just not guilty. So let's talk about Karen Read now, because this is her life, that the liberty of the rest of her life is at stake for her. Let's take a look and a listen to her arriving to court today.
Alan, how are you feeling this morning?
Great.
Are you surprised? Karen, how are you feeling this morning?
Karen, what will you do if you're found guilty?
So this is the arrival today. Your thoughts, your quick thoughts on that, Dr. Lieberman?
Sure. Well, you know, some of the jurors may have been turned off Karen Read because of her smirking and her laughing and her, you know, looking cocky and talking about how they don't have anything on me. You know, she told Matt that one day, oh, there's no real case here. And so that, I think, has been a turnoff to some jurors. But today, you know, now she's not quite as cocky, because I think they expected the jury to come back quickly with a not guilty verdict. And now, you know, they're a little more concerned.
Now, I want to show Karen Read leaving the courtroom. Now, this is after the jury came back with that note saying that they were deadlocked and the judge sent them back to deliberate. Let's take a listen.
Alan, what's your reaction to the note? What will you do if it's a hung jury?
It's going to be a hung jury case.
I'll tell you what, that's the least happy I've ever seen her during the course of this trial in any of the walks around the courthouse. What are you seeing here?
Yes, absolutely. You know, her face looks very serious, taut. You know, it's like, how is this happening to me? Yes, very different. Before she was, you know, like smiling and I think if not giving autographs, sort of acting like that, like she should be.
Yeah, and the dynamic there is that all these people that she didn't know beforehand support her, some, you know, raising money for her as well. And she does take time and acknowledges them and has been throughout. This moment's getting a little more tense, though, as we can all see. Now I want to show her at the end of the day. So this is after today's over. And tell me if you see or hear any difference here as we watch her.
Well, I think she's getting more glum as the day has progressed, you know, and less receptive to talking to people and, you know, just thinking that everything's going to go her way. It's very interesting. You know, I think that there's also another aspect to this is, as you know, of course, that juries tend to suddenly come up with a verdict or more easily come up with a verdict when it's a Friday. You know, and this week, next week is going to be July 4th. So they probably have plans for July 4th, and they don't want to still be in the jury box.
That was the shocker. It was a shocker on a Friday, but they sort of came to an agreement that they couldn't agree, and then the judge sent them back, and no more notes, so they'll be back on Monday. Dr. Carol Lieberman, we're out of time for tonight, but thank you so much for joining us, and we'll speak again soon. When we come back, we're going to bring in our insiders and take a look at some of the evidence, another look at some of the evidence that could be holding up this jury from agreeing.
Action was just to pull out the revolver, and it went off.
Two people accidentally shot.
Alec Baldwin was the actor on set. Alec Baldwin? Yes, sir.
Hurry, hurry, hurry was the motto on the set.
Right away, let's reload.
Alec Baldwin claims he didn't pull the trigger. Well, the FBI disagrees.
It's not going to fire until you pull the trigger.
They really do have to show that he couldn't care less.
The case against Alec Baldwin premieres Sunday, 9/8 Central on Court TV.
today. She grabbed my hands and she said, Google hypothermia, Google how long it takes to die in the cold. And so I had my phone out and it was cold and my hands were frozen and I have MS, and I took my phone out while she was screaming and shaking my arm, and I attempted to Google how long does it take to die in the cold.
When was that Google search made? Could this be one of the issues that is holding up this jury from agreeing with one another? Not being able to agree to what the facts are in this case. Well, Jen McCabe says she did the search in the morning. We know what the defense says. It was 2:27 is when that search was done, according to what the defense has argued. But both sides brought in experts to try to explain this digital evidence. Here's the expert for the state.
In conclusion, I determined that the tab that was used was focused at 2:27:40. So the tab was opened at that time, at which point it was being used to show Ozone basketball and Hockomock Sports websites. The 6:23 timestamp is when the search was first conducted. Never loaded the page, otherwise there'd be a record in the history database. And while that page was still loading, a secondary search was conducted for Hoslong to die in the cold. Again, that page never loaded either, although these both did show up in the Knowledge C database to show that the browser was trying to display these pages. Safari was closed prior to the Hoslong to die in the cold record being shown on screen at all. But when it was reopened at 10:33, in regards to whatever other Safari activity was to be conducted, it appeared on screen. So we have a 10:33 record where Hoslong to die in the cold was shown on screen, even though the page never successfully loaded.
So the defense brought in their own expert to try to explain to this jury why they believe it was actually done at 2:27. Take a listen.
Do you have an opinion as to the timing of that first search for Hoslong to die in cold?
Yes, I do.
What is that opinion?
That would have happened at or before January 29, 2022 at 2:27:40 a.m. in the morning.
And what is the basis for your opinion?
Again, by how this particular phone operates with that exact operating system, and comparing it to other data on that phone and the way it presented it out, it's all consistent with that search happening at or before that time.
And what opinions or conclusions did you reach regarding how, if any, how the 2:27 a.m. search was deleted?
Well, we know that that's in a deleted state. And importantly on that phone is when I keep using the proverbial we, I found a lot of other that would have been used or deleted artifacts between midnight and the early mornings on January 29, 2022.
Two experts saying different things. All right, let's bring in our insiders for their analysis. Karen Reed, supporter, creator of the Justice for Officer John O'Keefe and Karen Reed Facebook page. Nick Rocco back with us. And also back with us, the YouTuber behind Yellow Cottage Tales, Kevin Lenahan. So here's how I want to play this. This is one of those issues that if you believe it was 2:27, it's going to be tough for you to believe anything but not guilty. If you think this is a bunch of malarkey, this whole 2:27 thing, it might be tough to make you believe that she's going to be searching this at 2:27 in the morning. So what I want to hear from each of you are some of the facts and circumstances surrounding this, not the expert, but the other facts and circumstances surrounding the allegations of when the search was done that would make sense, that you might use to try to convince another juror. So I'll let you go first, Kevin. So if one of these jurors is saying, hey, it's 2:27, other than expert testimony, what would you argue to them that would you try to bring them over to say, no, it had to be done at 6 in the morning or 6:23?
First, I want to thank Nick for the moment of silence that he held in front of the courthouse today for John O'Keefe. Appreciate that, Nick. Good man. none of us are experts, right, on forensic data, although I did find it interesting here. I don't know how she could delete the search unless she deletes her search history, and he didn't say that, and the other aspects are there. But we can go to logic. So Karen on the ambulance asked the paramedics the same exact thing that she had asked Jen that prompted the actual search for it. And then we can just also say, does it really make sense that Jen McCabe goes home, tucks her daughters in, and kisses them goodnight, and is communicating with the coach of a girls basketball team that had invited her daughter to play, was Googling that basketball team, and at the same time searching how long it was going to take for her friend to die when they put him out strangely on their own lawn to die in the cold? I'll leave it at that.
Nick, how would you handle this if you're in the jury room and you know it's kind of like a wash between the experts, and you've got to you want to draw on some of the other facts and circumstances that you believe in this case? What would you say helps support the fact that this search was done at 227 outside of the expert testimony?
So I would basically say Jennifer McCabe left 34 Fairview Road. She went home. She was very active on her cell phone. She unlocks her cell phone. She sends 2 text messages. Right after the 2 text messages happen, she the butt dials between the 2 Higgins and Brian Albert occur at 2:22. Those calls were answered, and then you have 2 screenshots deleted around 2:26, and then all of a sudden she Googles this, right? And then Lucky the plow driver drives down the street at 2:45 in the morning, and there's no body outside. So Karen couldn't have hit him. Meanwhile, there's this other plan going on, you know, electronically behind the scenes. They may not be together, but something's going on there, and you have to look at it that way. Regardless of, you know, John being out there, he would be there if Karen hit him. There would be no butt dials. There would be no deletions of text messages and screenshots. There would be no lies between these people. And that's how I would basically tell a juror, hey, why is this stuff happening if she didn't Google this?
Kevin, you are in a unique position, right? Because you initially were thinking about this case in the same way Nick sees the case, and you see it completely differently now. Now, it can go one way or the other. We don't know which way the majority is here trying to pull over the rest, or if it's going to be like 12 Angry Men and the minority pulls the majority over if we get to a verdict. But what was it that changed it for you personally, the way you saw this case and the facts in this case?
That's a great question coming on the heels of the 227. So I knew nothing about data a year ago, right, when we were all first looking into this case. And in that original article, I knew I was looking at a defense theory intact, but yet to me, the 227 just seemed like data is data, right? So if she made this search and that's what they found on the phone, I was like, wow, if she made that search at 227, then there has to be a conspiracy. But then we get to the next hearing in court, and I find out that the state is disputing this, that they have their own expert, a top flight expert, that says, no, it didn't happen. So then you start digging into harder and harder into the data. And for me, what turned it was the timeline, the fact that there was really no opportunity to tamper with Karen's vehicle and then to plant evidence. If there's no opportunity for a crime, it doesn't matter whose sister knows who, there's no chance for a conspiracy.
And Nick, what really locked it in for you when you believe that there is a lot more going on here and there is a conspiracy? Was it one thing? Was it a couple of things? We have about 35 seconds.
It was just kind of a snowball effect. It was one thing after another that just kept coming out. And just the relationship between the family and the police, there is that blue thin line. And when you have a fallen officer on the lawn of another officer who has family and law enforcement, you can't break that. And Karen Reed was the outsider. And as more and more started coming out, the deleted messages, they got rid of the phones, the dog, the house, the carpet got done over. I mean, these aren't coincidences at this point. Everything is happening and it's all coming out, and lies are being exposed.
All right, our insiders are staying with us. When we come back, we're going to pit Karen Reed versus Trooper Proctor when we return.
Debrief.com.
His action was just to pull out the revolver, and it went off.
Two people accidentally shot.
Alec Baldwin was the actor on set. Alec Baldwin? Yes, sir.
Hurry, hurry, hurry was the motto on the set.
Right away, let's reload.
Alec Baldwin claims he didn't pull the trigger. Well, the FBI disagrees.
It's not going to fire until you pull the trigger.
They really do have to show that he couldn't care less.
The case against Alec Baldwin premieres Sunday, 9/8 Central on Court TV.
Several firefighters from the Canton Fire Department you'll hear from in regard to their observations of injuries, abrasions, and lacerations to the right arm of Mr. O'Keefe. You'll hear their testimony in regard to swelling of his eyes and other injuries that he observed. They observed redness from the cold that he had been lying out in for some time. And at least from 3 of those firefighters, you'll hear testimony anticipates detailing statements that the defendant made to them when they had asked about the origination of some of those injuries. The defendant stated repeatedly, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him.
So what exactly did she say? And did she confess to this, Karen Reed? I mean, that's a big fact in this case for the prosecution, if you believe it. A confession from the defendant. I hit him, I hit him, I hit him. Take a listen, again, to some of those witnesses who testified about hearing that.
After the fire department arrived and they sort of take over resuscitative efforts with regard to Mr. O'Keefe, what, if any, observations did you make of Ms. Reed and what she was doing or saying at that point?
Ms. Reed was visibly upset. She kept saying, this is all my fault. This is my fault. I did this. And she was very hysterical.
So in April of 2022, for the first time, you attributed the phrase, "This is my fault. I can't believe this happened," to my client, correct?
That's correct.
But nowhere in your official report did you say that, correct?
That's correct.
And nowhere in your interview with Trooper Proctor the next day did you say that?
That's correct.
You think that was a pretty important omission on your part?
It was an oversight.
She was screaming, is that my boyfriend? Is he dead?
And when you say screaming in a fairly loud voice, correct?
Very, very loud, yes.
You got there not long after Officer Saraf, correct?
Correct.
During the time that you were on scene and you heard Karen Reed screaming and yelling in this distraught and hysterical manner, you never once heard her say, "I did it," correct?
I did not.
As I was ventilating, I was able to ask, did anybody see anything? What happened? And there was one individual that replied several times, "I hit him, I hit him."
You said, as you're knelt down, "Do you know him?" directly to the female, and she answered your question with, "I hit him, I hit him."
Yes.
But that's not what you told Trooper Proctor in a February 8th interview.
I don't recall what I told Trooper Proctor.
You indicated that the defendant said, "I hit him," is that correct?
Yes.
That's something that she said once or more than once?
3 times. I hit him, I hit him, I hit him. Earlier, it was could I, did I. When she spoke to the paramedic, it was crystal clear. I hit him.
Okay, we've got our insiders back with us, Nick Rocco, Kevin Lanahan. All right, Nick, I'm going to you on this one. Why shouldn't they believe this confession? If you're in that jury room and you've got jurors who are believing that confession, what would you say to them about why they shouldn't?
Well, the number one thing is you have a police officer who not only works with Kevin Albert to be exact, he didn't put it in his police report. So you have a potential suspect admitting something to you, and you don't put it in a police report or even bring her down to the station and question her, right? Then you go to the other officer who said, is he dead, right? Is he dead? Is he dead? He didn't hear I hit him. You have Nuttall, who on the stand says one thing, but right after the incident happened, he told Trooper Proctor another thing. He didn't mention I hit him. And then you have Jen McCabe, right? Jen McCabe, the only time she ever put this in a report was when she spoke with the feds, which was, I believe it was a month or 2 months after she started receiving some internet harassment. And that's the only time that was documented, which was 2 years later, after she was being accused of doing this Google search. She needs Karen Reed to be found guilty so her and her family don't face any consequences in the future.
So, Kevin, you've got some folks who are not believing this in the jury room. What's the argument you make to them about why they should believe this alleged confession?
You know, I've always been consistent. The confession has never meant that much to me, because anytime you look at something that a defendant says or a witness says that is, especially if it's overheard, we can never know for sure what it means. To me, it was more important when Kerry Roberts said that Karen had called up at 5 and said, John's dead. And then a moment later called up and said maybe he was hit by a plow. And that's backed up by the fact that Kerry then called the police station and called the hospital to see if they found somebody like that. So I cannot really think of any innocent explanation for why Karen wakes up at 4:30. Suddenly she's calling her parents and something has changed, and she realized something's really, really wrong. And now she thinks John is dead, and she never calls 911. So to me, those words are more important.
Let's get to Trooper Proctor, the lead investigator in the case. Let's take a look at some of the things that happened to him while he was on the witness stand.
You also told ADA Lally that you, quote, did not have relationships or know members of the Albert or McCabe families, correct?
Correct.
And that's just not true, is it? You did know, you do know members of the Albert family. Isn't that right?
It's different from having a relationship with people.
But what about part of the question, did not have relationships or know members of the Albert or McCabe families? How about that part of the question?
Well, that's lumped in with the McCabes. I don't know the McCabe family, sir.
As the lead investigator and the case agent, you're aware it's also your responsibility and your obligation to investigate all potential individuals, right? All potential suspects.
Yes.
You're obligated to investigate anybody who would have a motive, a means, and an opportunity to commit the crime or the offense, correct?
Correct.
Motive includes anything from financial gain to could just be revenge, right?
Yes.
Could be a lover's quarrel, correct?
Yes.
Or it could be someone who's interested in someone romantically, correct?
Could be an argument inside of a vehicle.
So you became aware pretty early on that Mr. Higgins at least had a motive to want to visit harm on John O'Keefe, correct?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
No, absolutely not.
Well, you knew he had this flirtatious relationship with Karen Reed, is that right?
Yes.
You became aware that he ignored, you saw the text messages, you became aware that Karen Reed actually ignored text messages from Mr. Higgins while at the Waterfall Bar and Grill with John O'Keefe, correct?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
Yes.
And you were aware that at 12:20 a.m., Brian Higgins sent a text message to John O'Keefe, coaxing him to 34 Fairview, correct?
Objection.
Your assessment, personal assessment, that Karen Reed had struck this officer with a car gave you license to call her a
It was my emotions that got in the best of me.
and you called her a whack job. Gave you license to call her that too.
Yes.
Gave you license to say to your friends, oh, no. She's right?
That's what I wrote.
Gave you license to say that she's a
Again, another disgusting comment.
And then 5051 says, oh, she's skating, right?
Correct.
And what did you write after that?
My response was 0 chance she skated.
And then what did you write?
She's
0 chance she skates. She's right?
correct.
You decided on the 29th of January, 17 hours into this investigation, you decided individually, Trooper Proctor, you're not only going to put it on the girl, you decided you're going to make sure this is cut and dried, and the way you're going to do it is to make sure that she's That's what you were saying.
Okay, Kevin, let me ask you, if you're in that jury room again, and you've got jurors saying, listen, I cannot trust this guy. I don't like him. I don't believe him. What arguments would you make to other jurors not believing in Proctor, a reason why they should believe him or trust him beyond a reasonable doubt?
I don't know Michael Proctor, okay? Now, let's just assume that he does have some desire to want to see Karen Reed framed for this case. Michael Proctor had limited influence on how the evidence was gathered. He was never alone. Most of the evidence was gathered by specialists such as the CERT team and the chem team. It includes taillight pieces. It includes DNA. It includes data that was provided by Lexus Toyota. It includes data that was GPS data that's bulletproof, that's taken off the phone and was downloaded by Trooper Garino. So his impact on the evidence collected in this case is so minimal that you take out Michael Proctor and any evidence that you think that he collected, and you still have all the same fundamental evidence that shows this was a hit and run. That's why they didn't go in the house.
Nick Rocco, you're in that jury room, and you've got some folks who are you know, convinced by Kevin to discount the things. They don't like him, but they don't feel like it impacted the investigation. It didn't impact. What are the arguments you make as to why Trooper Proctor, his text messages and everything else are a reason not to trust the investigation?
Well, the number one fact is he had, you know, connections to these families, to the Alberts and the McCabe's. He's working on a cold case with Kevin Albert. He's setting up interviews with witnesses through Kevin Albert. Him and Kevin Albert specifically are driving drunk. He leaves his gun in his car. So you don't just leave your gun and badge in someone's vehicle. If you don't trust that person, they have a connection there. But aside from that, this man lied from the get-go on many affidavits about the time that the vehicle was seized. He said 5:30 for a reason, because if it was 5:30, he would have never been able to get the vehicle back to Canton in time to plant evidence. When you take the real time at 4:12, when he sees that vehicle, he's in the Sally Port, he's behind the vehicle, and with, you know, along with a few other of his buddies, you got Yuri Buchanan and Chief Berkowitz back there. We see them leave, we see them potentially pass something off. People are coming and going. This man is the lead investigator, putting guilt on Karen Reed hours after, you know, basically when John was found. And this guy can't be trusted. In my mind, I don't think any juror is stuck on Michael Proctor. I think they all know the type of man he is. And as far as that goes, I don't believe that would be an issue the jury would be stuck on. I think they would all agree that this man is no good.
Okay, so what we're going to do when we come back, Nick Rocco, Kevin Lenahan, you know they're on this program each and every night. They're very vocal, very outspoken about their perspectives of this case. So when we come back, I want to dive a little deeper into their lives and how they've been impacted by doing what they're doing relative to this case, because it's a small community up there in Massachusetts. We'll be right back.
One of the most successful true crime TV shows ever.
This is crazy.
Now has a new home on America's original true crime obsession, 48 Hours on Court TV. Coming up next on Court TV.
And when she couldn't find a hitman, she decided to use her son, Jason.
She said, no one is going to be getting in the way of me collecting that insurance money, or they'll wind up just like Norm.
Accomplice to Murder with Vinnie Politan. Sunday night, 8, 7 Central, only on Court TV.
one.
We have lost relationships with people we love because we chose to speak the truth and stand for an innocent woman that was framed. Our loved ones have lost relationships with people they love because we stood for truth. It ripples through the community in the town of Canton.
So this case, it's a trial, and there's a lot at stake for the trial. But as I've been saying from the beginning, this case is different than a lot, and the impact that it's having on the community and the people in the community is real. You know the way politics are these days, where like if you start talking about it at work or, you know, at Thanksgiving, all of a sudden, like people are taken aside and getting in a corner and completely changing their opinion about who you are as a person and unable to get along with you? Well, some of that is happening up there in Massachusetts for people who have opinions about this case. Take a listen again, and we're going to play for you both sides here. Take a listen to, this is just from today, people speaking out loud about the case.
Karen Reed was framed, and the world knows it. And anyone who looks at the scientific evidence, by the way, that came from people that are hired by the Department of Justice and the FBI, and guess what? The United States military. If there is someone on that jury that denies that irrefutable evidence, we got a problem. We have lost relationships with people we love because we chose to speak the truth and stand for an innocent woman that was framed. Our loved ones have lost relationships with people they love because we stood for truth. It ripples through the community. In the town of Canton, we have been subjected to domestic terrorism right here in the United States of America. Let that sink in. We will not be terrorized anymore. No more.
And it's real. I spent time up there. And on social media, like amplified by 1,000 times the way people talk about this case. I go on social media and I start talking, and it's like, boom, people hitting you from every side. I do a show here. I get direct messages every single time. Let's take a listen to someone from the other side who showed up at the courthouse today.
So I'm not going to allow people to bully and then act like, oh, well, we didn't do it. Like, that's bullying. And I'm not okay with bullying. If you have something to say, cool, you have that right. That's your First Amendment. But you just don't like anybody else's First Amendment right. And I have a problem with that. Maybe, just maybe, we should let the family grieve in peace and get some of peace. Like, the witnesses have been relentlessly harassed. The McCabe's and the Alberts, they're nothing more than witnesses in a crime. Leave them alone. You might believe whatever you want to believe, and that's totally fine. But what you don't have the right to do is torture, defame, and slander people. That is not okay.
And today they're, you know, seeing each other and having those discussions/arguments at the courthouse. So let me bring back in Nick Rocco and Kevin Lenahan, because they've been very vocal, very public about this, obviously, through the work that they're doing. That's one of the reasons we're having them on the show. So let me start with you first, Nick. How has taking this stance that you've taken, being public about it, supporting Karen Reed, how has that personally impacted you?
So when I got involved in this, it was April of 2023 when I had heard Turtle Boy reporting on it. And I wanted to do something in the Facebook group to go a little above and beyond, and I wanted to help her raise money. So we started doing these giveaways, and that turned into basically a full-time job for me. Every single week there would be, you know, new things being run, trips to Italy, trips to St. Martin, and running the Facebook group along with the admins. It's an everyday thing. And then once I started speaking out more publicly about it, I really don't get much hate. You know, social media, that's its own animal. People on there are behind it, you know, the keyboards, they're going to say what they want. But face to face, I have never encountered anybody specifically that has said, I believe Karen Reed is guilty. Now, as far as the town of Canton itself, I think that's where you see a little bit more of the division maybe between family members, because some may be friends with the Alberts versus some think Karen Reed is innocent. So that is where you're going to see a lot more of that family and friend division versus I live about 45 minutes away from this area. So as far as the effect on my life, other than an everyday job that I, got involved in this and wanted to just do the right thing, I have not really experienced much hate besides social media. And just one thing I do want to address about the people that did show up, those are 5 people. 3 of them at one point were Free Karen Read supporters. I'm not sure what made them switch. I think maybe their feelings got hurt at one point. 2 of those people also were at Jennifer McCabe's Christmas party. So these are not your everyday citizens who have been watching the trial and think Karen's guilty. These are people who have a motive behind wanting Karen Read to be guilty.
Kevin, how about you? How has this impacted you?
First, I want to point out that the woman in the green shirt, did you pick up that she threatened a juror? She said anybody who disagrees with us on the juror is going to pay. I forget how she worded it, but she pretty much threatened a juror. But for me, so, small YouTuber, I have been struggling with my channel for a year. I'm a writer, was just trying to grow it for that. And we did a live about a year ago, I'd say early July, where amazingly, at this point, I was leading Free Karen Read, although always the same person you see trying to ask questions. But at that point, the perception was I leaned Free Karen Read. So we had 2,600 people on live. That was a huge deal for me. That felt really good. And everybody on the Free Karen Read was saying, we love Yellow Cottage and this and that. But I kept asking questions. And that's not something they like. And that's not something the blogger that leads them tolerates. And they started coming at me as I kept finding more and more evidence that debunked the conspiracy. Then started the threats. Then started food about 20 times delivered unpaid to my house, pizzas and Chinese food. And I stood up to them, and I will always stand up to them. But it's definitely been a trying personal experience. And for a long time, it felt really alone out there. There were other people like Kate Peter, who was in town, but I didn't know them then. I had no connection to them. And it still is kind of a small group that is able to take the brunt and able to I've talked to lawyers that won't stand up to this group. It's very, very difficult. This other side of this is not all of them. Obviously, Nick is a good guy, good man. There's a lot of, and I've met a lot of good people in Dedham. But on the other side are a lot of crazy people that you can't take them for granted. And the type of destruction they do is on social media, where they dig into your past, dig into the past of your children or your wife, and they do whatever damage they can.
So I think, and I appreciate both of you coming on all the time, and I think what you show and demonstrate is that you can see something completely differently, yet have a discussion about it and agree to disagree, which is exactly what the jury did earlier today, and not make it personal. And that would be my, I think my little moral for all of this, because it's just like politics and everything else. We don't see the world the same way. We don't see the evidence the same way, but I appreciate both of you, and we'll see you on Monday. Have a great weekend. Nick Rocco, Kevin Lenahan. All right, folks, before we go, more work to do on missing child. This is Kambria Higgins. She's just 14 years old, missing from Nashville, Tennessee since June 18th. If you see Kambria, please pick up the phone, make the call 911, 1-800-THE-LOST, or you can call the Metro Police in Nashville, Tennessee. That phone number is right there on the screen. Let's see if we can get Kambria to a safe place this weekend. I'm Vinnie Politan. Thank you for watching. Have a nice weekend. And as always, please don't forget to hug the kids.